part of life in the United States is a paradox. Americans are highly religious, rated among the most religious nations in the world by polling organizations. And yet, the average American knows relatively little about religion. In his award-winning book, Religious Literacy: What Every American Needs to Know and Doesn't, Stephen Prothero of Boston University says that such religious ignorance is dangerous in a religiously diverse democracy like the United States. He also says that we haven't always been this way. In fact, as our religious diversity has increased over the past century, our religious literacy has dropped significantly.
His proposed solution is to require that all high school students take 2 religion courses, one on the Bible and one in world religions. Prothero's vision is for students to graduate with a strong grasp of the basics of the world's most common religions, as well as the stories, language, and traditions of the Bible, which has an enormous presence and influence in the United States. But would such an approach help improve interfaith understanding? Is covering just the basics enough to improve relationships between religious communities and help individuals work cooperatively toward the common good? It would be an improvement, but it would not be enough to build a meaningful knowledge base of interfaith leaders.
Interfaith leaders are on the front lines of religious difference, helping people who orient around religion differently work together for the common good and to better understand one another and one another's beliefs. In order to do that, they need a broad knowledge base, which we have broken into 3 main parts. The first part is what we call appreciative knowledge.
Appreciative knowledge is knowledge developed by actively seeking out the beautiful, the admirable, and the life-giving in others' traditions, rather than paying attention to the deficits, the problems, and the ugliness, or even just the facts of other traditions. We develop this appreciative knowledge in 3 ways. The first involves recognizing the contributions of other traditions, often in the form of exemplary figures. For example, many people have a limited knowledge base of Buddhism, but because they know that the Dalai Lama, a Buddhist religious leader, teaches compassion and peace, they are likely to understand Buddhism as a peaceful and compassionate tradition. Similarly, if you know that Dorothy Day worked tirelessly in care of the poorest and most abused members of our society, or that Mother Teresa went to great lengths to ease the suffering of the sick and the dying, you can more easily understand that providing care for others is an important part of Catholic teaching. Second, appreciative knowledge inclines us to have a sympathetic understanding of where a different religious perspective is coming from. You may not agree with the beliefs and practices of someone else, but having an appreciative knowledge of their tradition means that you can work to understand their point of view, their values, and their religious context despite that disagreement. On first blush, you might find the Jain practice of strict veganism and deep concern for harming even the smallest insect to be extreme. But through a deeper appreciation of the Jain concept of ahimsa, which means nonviolence, non-injury, or absence of desire to harm any life form, you'll gain a more nuanced understanding of this concept and how it forms the cornerstone of Jain ethics. If you studied more, you might learn that Gandhi borrowed heavily from this concept in developing his doctrine of nonviolent social reform, which in turn influenced Martin Luther King Jr. during the Civil Rights Movement. The third and final piece of appreciative knowledge is knowing what you need to know in order to work effectively with a different community. If you are working with the Sikh community, it will be helpful to know that most Sikhs are vegetarian. If you're planning an event that involves a meal, you would need to serve vegetarian-friendly food. Or maybe you're planning a day-long workshop that includes several Muslim participants. You know that Muslims pray at specific times during the day, so you can identify a place for them to prepare and offer their prayers where they will not be interrupted. Having appreciative knowledge of another religious tradition does not mean that you ignore the negative aspects of that religious tradition or history. It simply means that you actively work to emphasize the positive. Because we are more likely to hear about conflict than cooperation on the news, many Americans may have only heard the negative stories of interreligious conflict, scandal, or abuse. Appreciative knowledge works to correct gaps in our general knowledge about particular religious traditions and communities. Why is it so important for interfaith leaders to be able to address this knowledge gap? That's what we're going to explore in this lesson. But first, let's hear how some other interfaith leaders have gone about cultivating appreciative knowledge of religious traditions other than their own.